In the previous episode, we stood in the candlelit corridors of ancient Egypt and watched the fall of Amenemhat I, a king betrayed by his own guards, a blade in the dark that changed a dynasty. Today, we open a new chapter, one written not in papyrus, but in gunpowder and grief, a chapter that shattered the hope of peace and left a nation bleeding from within. It was not a foreign enemy, not a secret agent, not a shadow in the night. It was one of their own. Welcome to the red pages of history. On a warm November evening in 1995, the Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin, stepped off a stage after speaking of peace, unity, and the future. Seconds later, 3 gunshots echoed through the square, and history took a sharp turn. This was not just a political assassination, it was the murder of possibility, the silencing of a man who had once led armies into war and now dared to lead them into peace. Who pulled the trigger? Why did he do it? And how did one bullet unravel the most fragile hope the Middle East had ever known? Stay with me, because this story is not just about a man, it is about a moment when peace stood on the edge of a knife and fell. He was born in Jerusalem in 1922, not in the Israel we know today, but in a land under British rule, a place still searching for its name and its soul. Yitzhak Rabin grew up in a home of activists, his mother one of the first officers in the Haganah, his father a volunteer in the Jewish Legion. Both believed in building a homeland, and both raised a son who would one day defend it with fire and steel. He joined the Haganah as a teenager, fought in Syria and Lebanon against the Vichy French, and later against the British forces that ruled his land. In the War of 1948, Rabin commanded a brigade defending Jerusalem and helped shape the fragile birth of a nation. By 1967, he was Chief of Staff of the Israeli Defense Forces, leading the army to a stunning victory in the Six-Day War, a war that redrew maps and rewrote history. He was a soldier, a strategist, a man of discipline and silence. But then he did something few warriors ever do. He changed. Rabin became Israel's ambassador to the United States, then entered politics, and in 1974 became Prime Minister for the first time. He returned to power in the 1990s, and this time he came not with tanks, but with treaties. He signed the Oslo Accords with the Palestinians, shaking hands with Yasser Arafat on the White House lawn, a moment that stunned the world and split his own people. He signed a peace treaty with Jordan, ending decades of hostility and opening a door that had been locked since 1948. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1994 alongside Arafat and Shimon Peres. But peace came at a price. Many saw him as a traitor for giving away land. Others saw him as a hero for giving peace a chance. He was no idealist. He was a realist, a man who had seen too much war to believe in its glory. He once said, "You don't make peace with friends, you make peace with enemies." And that belief cost him his life. It was November 4th, 1995, Tel Aviv, Kings of Israel Square. The air was warm, the crowd, electric thousands, had gathered, waving flags, singing songs of peace. Rabin stood on stage beside Shimon Peres, his voice steady, his words simple. "I was a soldier, I fought in wars, I have seen the pain of battle, and I say to you today, enough." He stepped back from the microphone, the music rose, the crowd cheered, and Rabin smiled, not the smile of victory, but of relief. He walked down the steps toward his car, surrounded by bodyguards, the crowd still chanting his name. And then, 3 shots, sharp, sudden, final. The square froze, the music stopped, the flags dropped, and the future shattered. Rabin collapsed, blood soaking through his white shirt. His bodyguards tackled the shooter, a young man named Yigal Amir, a Jewish extremist who believed Rabin had betrayed his people by signing the Oslo Accords. The bullets tore through Rabin's back, puncturing his lungs, rupturing his spleen. He was rushed to Ichilov Hospital unconscious, barely breathing. Doctors fought for over an hour to save him, but the damage was too deep, too violent, too final. At 11:15 p.m., Eitan Haber, Rabin's longtime aide, stepped out of the hospital and faced the cameras, his voice shaking, his eyes hollow. The bullet that killed Yitzhak Rabin did not just pierce his body, it pierced the heart of a nation. In the days that followed, Israel mourned not just a man, but a moment, a fragile window where peace had seemed possible. His funeral was attended by leaders from 80 countries, a global chorus of grief and disbelief. But inside Israel, the silence was heavier than the speeches. Rabin's successor, Shimon Peres, tried to carry the torch, but the flame flickered and faded. The government of Israel announces in consternation, in great sadness, and in deep sorrow, the death of Prime Minister and Minister of Defense Yitzhak Rabin, who was murdered by an assassin tonight in Tel Aviv. The crowd outside wept. Some screamed, others stood silent, unable to believe that the man who had led them through war and dared to lead them into peace was gone. The square was renamed Rabin's Square. The blood-stained lyrics of the song he had just sung were found in his pocket, folded and still warm. This was not just a killing, it was a rupture, a moment when a nation looked in the mirror and saw the enemy within. Rabin was not killed by a foreign power, not by a terrorist from across the border, but by one of his own, a man who believed that peace was treason and that bullets were justice. And in that moment, the dream of reconciliation was buried beside the man who dared to believe in it. The bullet that killed Yitzhak Rabin did not just pierce his body, it pierced the heart of a nation. In the days that followed, Israel mourned not just a man, but a moment, a fragile window where peace had seemed possible. His funeral was attended by leaders from 80 countries, a global chorus of grief and disbelief. But inside Israel, the silence was heavier than the speeches. Rabin's successor, Shimon Peres, tried to carry the torch, but the flame flickered and faded. Within months, the political tide shifted. Benjamin Netanyahu, a fierce critic of the Oslo Accords, rose to power, and the peace process began to unravel. The dream of coexistence was replaced by fear. The handshake on the White House lawn became a memory, and the streets that once sang for peace now echoed with division. Rabin's assassin, Yigal Amir, was sentenced to life in prison, but his ideology lived on in whispers, in rallies, in posters that had once shown Rabin in a Nazi uniform. The shock was not just that Rabin was killed, but that he was killed by one of his own, by a Jew, by an Israeli, by someone who believed that peace was betrayal. For Palestinians, Rabin's death was a death of hope. Many believed he was the only Israeli leader who truly understood the cost of war and dared to imagine something else. Violence surged, trust collapsed, and the roadmap to peace was buried under layers of suspicion and blood. And yet, Rabin's legacy did not vanish. It became a question, a challenge, a mirror. What kind of nation do we want to be? Do we choose fear or courage, silence or dialogue, revenge or reconciliation? Every year, on the anniversary of his death, thousands gather in Rabin Square, candles are lit, songs are sung, and his final speech is played again and again. I was a soldier, I fought in wars, I have seen the pain of battle, and I say to you today, enough. But the question remains, was it enough? Or was it just the beginning of a longer war, one not fought with tanks, but with memory? This was not just a political assassination, it was a national wound, and the scar still burns. If this story gripped you, if it made you see history not as dusty pages, but as living moments, then you are in the right place. Here we uncover assassinations and killings that changed the course of nations, moments where a single act of violence rewrote the destiny of a people, or even the path of humanity itself. From the shadowed corridors of ancient palaces to the crowded streets of the modern world, we bring you the stories where power, ambition, and fear collide and history bleeds into the present. Subscribe now and join us on the red pages of history, where every episode takes you to the heart of a moment that shaped our world, and every story leaves a mark you will not forget.